Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On, on behalf of the Clean Air Task Force, I would like to welcome you to the Zero Carbon Pavilion, Zero Carbon Future. My name is Steve Brick. I'm a member of the senior leadership team at Clean Air Task Force, and we are delighted to host this event today. I'm especially delighted to welcome Assistant Secretary Brad Crabtree to our stage. Brad and I have known each other, I think, for 25 years at this point, and I don't think anybody has labored more tirelessly in the effort to bring carbon capture and sequestration technology to fruition. And in fact, in the fullness of time, I think if anybody deserves the title of patron saint of CCS, it is probably Brad. And we've had a long-standing friendship and working relationship, and it's a great treat to have you here, Brad. So without further ado, thank you all for coming. I will now turn the mic over to the moderator.
Thank you, Steve. It has been a long time. It was the very early 2000s, like 2002, 2003. We've sort of grown old together. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. Thank you for coming. I want to recognize our friends and colleagues from Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Timor, Leste, at least those three countries, maybe more. It's wonderful to have you here. And I'll talk in a moment about the Carbon Management Challenge, but it was even better to have you, Nomesia, and Karinsa there yesterday for the launch of the Carbon Management Challenge. So we'll talk about that. But Tim and Katherine, thanks again for all that you do. What Steve just said about me equally applies to the two of you. So thanks for just really being dedicated to this effort and helping leaders like we have in the room in so many countries around the world. So, and thanks to everyone who's joined us. Today we're obviously talking about unique climate-related challenges that small island developing states face. And you all make this case, you all know this, you're responsible for a fraction of overall global CO2 emissions, as are many other countries in the developing world. But you suffer, of course, the disproportionate impacts from climate change, and I could list them all, but you know them. If there's any positive side to what we've seen in the past year around the world, it's certainly not the impacts, but the fact that they're now being felt more broadly around the world, and I think people in more privileged parts of the world are starting to internalize what we're facing with climate change, and it's not just those of you in island states where it's been obvious for a long time. When I was coming to the COP venue this morning and thinking about this event, I remember the first COP I went to. I've only been to 3, this is only my 3rd, but I went to Copenhagen, which was an important one. And as you enter the main COP center, what we today call the Green Zone, there was a man at a booth right by the entrance, so I saw him every day for a week. And he had a big banner, and I believe he was from coastal Haiti, but it was 1.5 to stay alive. And that really affected me, seeing that every day, and every day I'd think about that. And so I've just thought, kind of come back full circle today. The other thing I'd note, as nations, your countries, too, still depend on fossil energy for power, although you're making great efforts to diversify your energy sectors. And some of the countries, Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana here in particular, depend very much on hydrocarbons for your broader economy as well. I would note I'm from North Dakota in the United States, so I come from a hydrocarbon economy. And the United States itself is the world's largest oil and gas exporter, so you're in good company. I think what that means, though, is we all also have a particular burden of responsibility to take action. The purpose of today's conversation, though, is the focus on carbon management in particular. And it's really important to emphasize for quite some time now, the scientific bodies around the world have emphasized the central importance, the essential importance of carbon management to meet our climate goals. And that is finally starting to take root as well, that a deeper understanding about how, if you think about the various pathways for reducing emissions across that whole portfolio of solutions, carbon management is one of the most important. It's not the only one, but it's one of the most important. And fortunately, we're seeing a whole lot of progress. Admittedly, we're starting later than renewables, but the technology's been around for many years, but the increase in deployment is starting late. We have over 40 commercial scale projects operating in the world today, well over 300 projects in the project development pipeline. I mentioned the Carbon Management Challenge. My president, President Biden, announced that in April in New York as part of the Major Economies Forum. And it's the principal goal of the Carbon Management Challenge is to accelerate the deployment of carbon management infrastructure on a truly global basis, both the technologies and the infrastructure, with a goal of 1 gigaton total capacity globally carbon capture and storage by 2030. But this is all with the goal of keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. And what that means are an aggressive suite of mitigation options to complement carbon capture and storage, especially a tripling of renewable energy, that pledge, ending net deforestation, and I would add to that the fourth being real progress on tackling non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions, methane in particular. And fortunately, we're making really great progress, especially here at this COP in terms of commitments, so that's very positive. I was personally very inspired last night. For those who haven't heard about the event last night, we had, I don't know how many countries represented in the room. It was a COP presidency event, but we now have, Adam, where's Adam? Is it 19 countries? We're now 20 formally confirmed. 20 countries are now formally confirmed in the Carbon Management Challenge. And what I'm so excited about is that this group of countries reflects the true diversity of our world. We have the industrialized world, the developing world, we have East, we have West, we have the world's largest oil and gas exporters, we have some of the world's most advanced countries in terms of climate action. Iceland and Sweden, they don't have any fossil fuels, they've decarbonized their power sectors, yet they too are prioritizing carbon management to meet their own climate goals. And I was really pleased to see Trinidad and Tobago and Timor, Leste represented in the room as well. And I hope your two countries and Guyana will become the next members of the Carbon Management Challenge. So that was really a great moment. One of the things that we're going to focus on as a group of nations committed to advancing this technology is to really focus on the things we need to enable the deployment. And some of these things are vitally important, but they're not difficult to achieve. Developing frameworks for the storage of geologic storage of CO2, regulatory frameworks for transporting CO2 across, so this is a little more complicated because it's multiple countries, but transporting CO2 across international boundaries. Also, more flexibility and opportunities with carbon credits, so carbon credits can help finance projects. There's just a whole range of things. Concessional finance, top priority. Obviously, countries like yours have an interest in, are pursuing, exploring projects for carbon capture and storage, but you need a pathway to finance those projects. So that's going to be priority number one for the Carbon Management Challenge. So I just want to really, I think we're at a moment of growing commitment. We have some vehicles now, like the Carbon Management Challenge, to pursue these ambitions and to do so together. 10, 20 years ago, an initiative like the Carbon Management Challenge, when it started off, it was probably North America and Europe with Japan and Korea thrown in, sometimes not even Korea. And now, here we're starting off with a new global initiative that is truly global in scope and a true partnership. I'm excited about that. And I'm very happy for this event, and Tim and Katherine, for your efforts to engage the countries we have here today. I'm certainly willing to work with both of you to make a special effort to give some priority to island nations to be part of this larger effort to advance carbon capture and storage, carbon dioxide removal, and everything else that goes with it. And that's also not just a message from me, but also the U.S. government officially, where there are ways we can help with providing guidance on the development of geologic storage frameworks, characterization of reservoirs for CO2 storage, things like that. We'd be welcome to explore that with you. So with that, I will thank you for being here and turn it back over to Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
One more thing, I may have to leave before this event ends because our deputy secretary is arriving and he needs to talk to me. So if I leave, it's only for that reason. But thank you.
Is this mic on? Is this working? Assistant Secretary Crabtree, thank you very much for that welcome. Yeah. So I'm going to be moderating today. My name's Tim Dixon from IEAGHG. We're an international research organisation. And we thought it'd be better if I moderated from down here along with our panelists. But what I'm going to do first is introduce quickly. We have a great panel today. Brad's described the reason and the rationale very well for what we're doing. And so thank you very much to Brad for that welcome. Thank you very much to Steve from the Clean Air Task Force for hosting us in the pavilion here as well. But what you can see today, we have Karinsa, Tulsie, who's Deputy Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries in Trinidad and Tobago. Also in Trinidad and Tobago, we have Professor David Alexander from the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We have Professor Dr. Raffie Hosein from the University of West Indies in the Trinidad and Tobago. They'll be followed by a video presentation by Josephine Maximus and Adiola Walcott from the University of Guyana. And then we have, for the first time at a COP, sharing information on CCS developments, Nomesia dos Reis from ANPM in Timor, Leste. And Professor Katherine Romanak will do the wrap-up at the end. So before we get stuck into that great panel, my role is to do a tiny bit of scene setting for those of you who might be new to CCS. I have to show this disclaimer to say that we're not part of we were set up by the International Energy Agency, but we're not part of them formally, so anything I say does not represent their views. However, I do use their material a lot. And for those of you who may be new to carbon capture and storage, this cartoon describes what it does. It takes CO2 from large point sources, captures it, stops it from going into the atmosphere, and injects it deep into the ground. So it works on any large point source of CO2, your power stations, cement plant, gas processing, refineries, iron and steel. It can even capture CO2 from the atmosphere. And the crucial thing is, it's injected into deep geology. And the one thing wrong with this cartoon is the scale of the storage, because this is the scale we're looking at. We inject to at least 800 meters deep, and this is a real project in Canada where they're injecting to 3,000 meters deep the CO2 from a power station. And this is a diagram from the IPCC that shows how storage security improves with time. It's a very safe system for geological storage of CO2. It's been classed as permanent in the new work under Article 6.4, and for removals, it's been considered as permanent removal when you use geological storage. What's also good with the geological storage side is we do have regulations to ensure that it is safe and secure. In this context, in the UNFCCC, we have the modalities and procedures for CCS in the Clean Development Mechanism that were agreed in 2011. And they apply a de facto regulation for geological storage, protection of the environment, and the carbon accounting. And those modalities and procedures for CCS will be relevant now for Article 6.4 and Article 6.2 for projects where there is international cooperation in CCS projects. We also have for storage offshore, beneath the seabed, we have the London Protocol, allows for this, has guidance to regulate. It has allowed the export of CO2 for storage offshore as well through the London Protocol. So that's all in place. We even now have standards, international standards, from ISO TC 265 for all parts of the CCS chain. And individual countries have their own regulations. The US is well established, EU, Australia, Japan, Canada. And all of these regulations derive from the methodology that's in the IPCC Greenhouse Gas Inventory Guidelines from 2006, for which every country has to use those guidelines in their reporting of emissions and emissions saved through CCS activities. And if your country needs to develop regulations to start with, as your countries do, the IEA, my colleagues in the IEA, have their nice handbook on developing a legal and regulatory framework, and that draws upon all of that work. So why are we doing CCS at all? Well, the IPCC says we need it to achieve limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. And more than that, because it applies to so many different large point sources of CO2, if we don't do CCS, the costs of mitigation to achieve 1.5 go up significantly. That's a key conclusion from the IPCC and from the IEA. And the most recent IPCC reports last year and this year reinforce the need for CCS and carbon dioxide removal as well. They also point out that there is more potential storage on the planet than we need to achieve 1.5 degrees. However, it's not being deployed at a fast enough rate. So there aren't enough CCS projects. And the reason being, we need more policy instruments to stimulate those projects. So my friends in the IEA produced their good reports. I like the one from 2020, their special report on CCUS, because it sums up what's special about CCS. We need all the mitigation technologies and options, of course, but with CCS, it can be retrofitted to existing energy assets. So your existing power stations, your existing cement plants, your refineries, you don't have to dismantle and rebuild new. You can bolt on CCS, bolt on capture onto those existing plants. It also, whereas in the power sector you have alternatives such as wind and solar and nuclear, for heavy industry such as cement, especially, there's no alternative. To decarbonize the cement industry, there is only one option, and that is CCS. Similar, steel has limited options, and CCS is the one you can do now. And there's even the potential to decarbonize aviation through the production of synthetic aviation fuel. It's also a platform for low carbon hydrogen production, and as I said before, for removing carbon from the atmosphere. And ready for the COP26 in Glasgow, the IEA produced their net zero roadmap for the energy sector to get to net zero by 2050. Lots of things in that. The headline things about no new oil and gas developments, no new coal developments. But within that, they said by 2035, we've got to be capturing and storing 4 gigatons of CO2. That's 100 times more than we do at the moment. So we need to scale up a lot. Because we're not scaling up enough, the IEA this year, looking at action in this decade to 2030, issued a new report, the Credible Pathways to 1.5. And this is specifically for action this decade. And they highlight 4 areas that we need to move on immediately. One is decarbonizing electricity. Second is reducing deforestation to zero. The third is tackling methane. And the fourth is the carbon management, CCS and carbon dioxide removal that Brad Crabtree just described. With the target, we need to be achieving 1.2 gigatons by 2030. So this was launched at the Major Economies Forum in April, and President Biden also announced the Carbon Management Challenge that we've just heard about. And I'm really pleased that you had seats at the table yesterday for the official launch of the Carbon Management Challenge at this COP. Brad described this very nicely. The goals are to accelerate the deployment of projects to reach a gigaton by 2030. I'm really pleased to say that new countries are joining. So since we started the COP, 2 more countries have joined. We started with 17, now there's 19. Since last night, there's now 20 with the addition of Romania that is not even on the slide yet. And it's a nice, as Brad says, across the globe representation of countries. So we will look forward to supporting that going forwards. And I do have to note that the UK government is in the room, and the UK government is one of the leads of this, along with Brazil, Indonesia, US, and Canada. So that sounds very good, and why we need to be doing CCS. What's not so good is the rate of building projects. And the IA updated their net zero roadmap report, ready for this year, for this COP, and we're not building projects. In the 3 years since the last net zero roadmap, we're falling short in the deployment. The good news is, if you look at the graph on the top right, the project pipeline is really increasing by 100% since the last 2 years. So there's now over 400 projects in operation or in development. That's very good news. What's not so good is that even if all of those projects are developed and operate, that's only a third of what is needed in the net zero emission pathway of the IEA to get the energy sector to net zero by 2050. So we need to do more. Countries under the Paris Agreement, as well as their NDCs, have to submit a long-term greenhouse gas emission development strategy, which is looking to the mid-century. And this is good. It's looking, the NDCs are focused on 2030. This is going beyond those. And the good news is the majority of those, 69 have been submitted and 47 have CCS in them. As countries realize, they're putting the easier to do mitigation options in the NDCs, but they have to go further to achieve net zero, to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. Thanks to my friends at the Global CCS Institute, this is the latest map from their global status report. It shows the facilities in operation, 41 facilities operating at large scale, 50 million tons a year captured, 26 in construction, 325 in development. And what I really do hope, and these also, the distribution of these reflect where the best policies are to stimulate CCS. And in future years, I really hope to see dots on this map for Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana, and Timor Leste. So with that, that's the scene setting, and I'd now like to invite Ms. Karinsa Tulsie, Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, to provide us a government perspective for Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much. Karinsa, over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah. Yeah. Just this one, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Tim, and thank you for the opportunity today for us to share Trinidad and Tobago's experience as a small island developing state, actively pursuing the development of carbon capture and storage. So firstly, I'll tell you a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago's context, provide an update on the carbon capture storage work that we are currently undertaking, speak a little bit with regard to the draft policy to create carbon capture and storage legislation proposals, and I'll go a little bit into some of the additional greenhouse gas reduction strategies that we are pursuing in the country. So Trinidad and Tobago, we are the southernmost twin island state in the Caribbean archipelago. And we have been an oil producer for more than a century, and we would have moved from being oil dominant to being mostly natural gas based since in the early 1990s. We have world-class petrochemical plants. We actually have 10 ammonia, 6 methanol plants operational, with some additional ammonia and methanol capacity that is non-operational at this time. We also have LNG trains, 3 operational, 1 non-operational. So 99% of our power generated is from natural gas, and so therefore our economy, as Brad would have mentioned earlier, is strongly linked to our oil and more so our gas production. Because of the very extensive energy infrastructure that we have, and because of our small size, we actually ranked quite high in terms of our emissions of CO2 per capita. We are actually in the top 10. So, and that's because Trinidad and Tobago is so small in size. So in terms of total emissions, we emit approximately 35 million tons per annum, and approximately 45% of that is pure CO2 from the ammonia plants, which are in a cluster in our Point Lisa's industrial estate. So that makes it a bit simpler for us to implement CCS because of that advantage, I would say. So considering all of this, I would want to say that Trinidad and Tobago is not an irresponsible hydrocarbon producer. So we are actually actively pursuing pathways to decarbonize and reduce our emissions and deal with the climate crisis that we are all facing. But our approach has been multi-pronged. So while we focus on decarbonization, because as I said, natural gas is a critical part of our economy, and we believe it's important for meeting future energy demand as well as ensuring energy security. We also we focus on CCS as the pathway to decarbonization as well as energy efficiency. But at the same time, it's not an excuse for us to get a pass from our adaptation obligations. So we are also very focused on accelerating, development of the renewable energy potential in the country. So with regard to CCS and creating the enabling environment for the development of CCS, we have a government-led steering committee whose mandate was recently extended to 2025 to focus on CO2 sequestration. So the steering committee is looking at 3 areas currently. The first one is CO2 sequestration, and we have partnered with my friends here at the UE and the UTT to look at developing a carbon atlas for the country, and this will detail the storage potential in depleted oil and gas reservoirs, both onshore and offshore in Trinidad, and these could be used to sequester the carbon dioxide that is captured. But I'll allow Professors Hosein and Alexander in their presentation to provide you with more details on this part of it. With regard to the second area, we are looking at methane emissions and addressing that. And this is focused on identifying strategies to reduce fugitive emissions from our industrial and waste management operations. So this is being done in collaboration with our national gas company, and we are working on a methane emissions management policy. Finally, we are also looking at policy and regulatory aspect, and we have a draft policy on CCS-specific legislation, which has been sent to stakeholders for feedback. And of course, this will implement the required regulations and legislation to implement CCS in the country. And we are looking to have this approved by the cabinet of the country within the next year. So I think creating the legislative environment is a key factor in ensuring the implementation of CCS within Trinidad and Tobago, and so the government has taken the lead and is prioritizing this action for us to move forward. We also have some tax allowances for companies engaged in CCS, and we are also looking at additional incentives that may be required to push the industry forward. So just to go into the draft policy, some of the things that are included would be an exploration license to explore geologic formations for the long-term storage of greenhouse gases, and this will be granted by competitive bidding. We would then award storage permits to licensees for eligible storage formations, and of course, this would come out of the work that the universities are doing now. We would have a state entity designated as the aggregator responsible for creating a pipeline infrastructure. So this would take CO2 from emitters to the storage facility, and that state company would accept the transportation and the marketing risks. We would have a per project, so each project would have a fund that is financed by the specific licensee to be administered by the state for any remedial works or long-term monitoring for permanence and leakage. And of course, in the end, a transfer of these liabilities back to the state rather than it remaining with the operator in perpetuity. And finally, as I mentioned, pursuit of CCS or energy efficiency and decarbonization is not a way out for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to to excuse themselves from pursuing adaptation strategies that are required. So we also have several other greenhouse gas reduction strategies that are being pursued. A major one is our utility scale renewable energy power plant, and this comprises of 2 plants which have started construction in this year, and on completion we will have a combined capacity to generate 112.2 megawatts of solar electricity that will go into the grid. We are also actively pursuing our hydrogen economy, so blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Of course, with the CCS initiatives, the blue hydrogen would become feasible and implementable, and also the pursuit of green hydrogen through our potential offshore wind availability. And of course, there are feasibility studies to be done, assessment programs, but it's something that we have had a roadmap done by the IDB, and we are actively pursuing implementation in the future. We also have electric vehicle incentives, so for the importation of electric vehicles to encourage the replacement of fossil fuel in the transportation sector. And we also have constructed a solar park at our international airport as well. So those would be some of the additional strategies that we are pursuing, and I think that is the end of my presentation. I will be happy to take any questions afterwards.
Deputy Permanent Secretary Tulsie, thank you very much for that. What we'll do is we'll take questions at the end of the session, if that's okay. So thank you very much for that update. Lots of government progress there in Trinidad and Tobago. Very welcome to see. So that's from the ministry level. Now we're going to hear from the people doing the hard work on the ground, so to speak. So can I invite Professor David Alexander, followed by Professor Raffie Hosein, to give us an update on the rest of the work going on in Trinidad and Tobago. So Professor Alexander, over to you.
All right. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you, Tim, for the introduction, and I want to give a special thanks to our Deputy Permanent Secretary for doing such a good job in laying the foundation as to what Trinidad and Tobago is doing and the context for actually driving CCS in Trinidad and Tobago. So this work is being done jointly by 2 universities in Trinidad and Tobago, the University of the West Indies and the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We work collaboratively to be able to get this work done and do the research, share resources, and so on. And so I lead on the University of Trinidad and Tobago's side, and Professor Hosein on the University of the West Indies. And so this energy map of Trinidad and Tobago says it all in terms of what we plan to do by looking at the potential for storing carbon dioxide in depleted oil and gas reservoirs. So those red and green areas shows you that we have fields that are both onshore and offshore that are potential storage sites. The good thing for Trinidad and Tobago is that apart from having experience in the oil and gas business, we have also done really good work in terms of quantifying our emissions, knowing what the sources of these emissions are. And so from early results, we more or less saw that most of our emissions come from really good point sources, the petrochemical sector, the industrial sector, which accounts for approximately 80%. So we have 2 parts of the puzzle to look at. And so we wanted to see what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago apart from what the universities were doing. And we also wanted to see if we can learn from the international stakeholders in terms of what they do in CCS. And so we held a symposium in 2019 that brought all the stakeholders together, whether it be locally, internationally. So we had 2 days of talks, presentations, and the second day, we had a roundtable discussion to try to determine what the way forward is. And after having numerous suggestions, unanimously it was agreed that we need to be able to know what are the potential sites to be able to develop these type of projects. And so hence we move forward with the idea of doing the carbon storage atlas for Trinidad and Tobago. So we had strong justification for moving forward with this project. We see it as a tool for moving Trinidad and Tobago into net zero future. And our main aim for this project is to be able to identify geologic sites that are suitable for carbon storage, starting with depleted oil and gas reservoirs. And it's the first type of study like this in our region. So you would have heard from the Deputy PS about the cabinet-appointed steering committee that was formed in February 2021. And so in terms of the carbon storage atlas, the work is being led by the two universities, as I mentioned, with strong support from our Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. We have project assistants, project associates, postgraduate students, all getting involved, and we are building capacity with them in terms of CCS. And we also have the support of other operators being part of the project. At COP26, our Prime Minister made a statement which was very important to us. He stated that we as a country intend to explore the use of industry-generated carbon dioxide in possible carbon sequestration projects. And you know, when your Prime Minister speaks, it gives you the energy to actually move forward in terms of getting projects done. So we are fully energized to move these projects forward, and so we have been working on a number of fields, both onshore and offshore in Trinidad and Tobago. Actually, combined, we are looking at approximately 25 fields in the southern basin, onshore and offshore, in the northern basin, and in the Columbus Basin. So initially, we started off doing the assessments using theoretical estimates. We plan to move on next year with the effective storage capacity estimates. But in a nutshell, we followed the South African model in terms of the assessments that they did, the methodologies that they used, the equations that they followed, and we programmed that more or less in an Excel-based spreadsheet. We tested it with their values to see if it works properly. We also used some of our local data to be able to see if it matches. And so we got a good match, so we were able to move forward with this tool. So now I'll pass you over to Professor Hosein to continue the presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Alexander. Good morning to everyone. So you have seen the calculator that was developed by the UTT, and our part was to develop a workflow in order to generate the important parameters that are required for the calculator. And these would be parameters like the aerial extent of the reservoir, from maps, geological and geophysical maps and net sand maps, to determine the reservoir thickness, and also from well log data. It is also important to know the reservoir pressure and temperature in order to determine the density of the CO2 in order to determine the storage estimate. What is also important is determine some of the parameters like the amount of fluids that are presently in the reservoir after production, and to determine the porosity and the remaining pore volume for the estimates of the CO2 storage. And using the workflow and obtaining the parameters and then applying the parameters into the calculator, we were able to determine storage volumes for certain parts and sections of reservoirs, which are indicated in the black circles. And you can see that from about 5 of the onshore fields, we were able to determine storage estimates of about 20 megatons or million tons. From 5 offshore fields, the storage capacity estimated is about 90 million tons. And 3 small blocks also to the west, it's 15 megatons from 2 offshore blocks. So although we started doing the estimates, these are for just sections of our reservoirs and not the entire reservoirs themselves. So our depleted oil and gas reservoirs, we can store much larger volumes than those indicated here. So this work is still ongoing. The challenges that we have thus far is data gathering and obtaining this data in a timely manner. So that might be some of one point that will is a challenge for us in getting data in a timely manner. Also, funding support is very important in this type of work. Some of the key highlights from the work that we have conducted so far, as Professor Alexander mentioned, we use graduates and students in this project in order to build capacity locally. We also need to get more data in order to determine the full storage potential of our reservoirs and also to update our geological map. Very importantly, stakeholders' interest, which is from government, our energy industries, and also public awareness. Also important is international engagement, and we do have strong support in that area. We also examining storage in saline aquifers. We would like to determine the extent of our saline aquifers and to determine how much we can store, because you can store large capacities, large volumes of CO2 in these aquifers. Our next step would be looking to establish the characterization of our reservoirs and to conduct reservoir simulation model studies. We would like to continue this project as soon as possible by having a demonstration project, and site selection is very, very important. We need to understand better injectivity, capacity, and confinement. Public awareness is very, very important. We need to ensure that the public knows that CO2 storage is very safe, and it also helps and support climate changes. What we are planning is a symposium to be held next year, April 25th and 26th, at the university perhaps, or one of the venues. And our plan is to invite all the government ministries and also to have industry persons invited at this symposium. In the short term, we would like to work together with all the working groups that has been established by Cabinet. We are also looking to provide short courses and a degree in carbon management studies, and this would be under a CCUS, or Carbon Capture and Utilization Center, which was launched on September 21st. And this center will be operated and managed by both institutions, the UWI and the UTT. We would also like to conduct full-scale projects and also look at other projects involving blue and green hydrogen production and direct air capture for CO2. As I mentioned, the center, the CCUS center that we have established, would be looking at both hydrogen, generation of hydrogen, blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, and also looking at CO2 storage. So that's the end of our presentation. And I would like to thank the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, and the Novo Energy and BPTT for the data provided and the funding support. And just to share with you a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago, we have beautiful beaches. We are famous for carnival and steel pan music. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hosein, Professor Alexander. Thank you for that. And we will take questions at the end. We'll move on. I'm told we're allowed to go to 11:15. So if that's okay with everybody, we've next got a video from Guyana. Now, yes, Guyana is on the mainland.
My name is Josephine Maximus.
Hang on a second. Guyana is on the mainland of South America. So it's not an island, but it is classed as an island by the Green Climate Fund for the Green Climate Fund's criteria for funding. So it's in terms of climate finance, that's its classification, and that is why they're joining in here. And also because we just heard a great example of knowledge transfer, global South-South transfer from South Africa to Trinidad and Tobago. Now Trinidad and Tobago are doing it to Guyana. We've seen this beautiful transfer going on as Trinidad and Tobago becomes the regional centre of expertise. And this is also what we're hoping to happen from Trinidad and Tobago to Guyana, Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste will then share with other countries in Southeast Asia as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Josephine Maximus and Adiola Walcott, who are at the University of Guyana. So if you could play the video now. And they apologise for not being able to get the funding to travel. They did want to come, but it was a funding issue for them to travel to the COP. So thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Tulsie Maximus from the Department of Petroleum and Geological Engineering, University of Guyana. Welcome to COP28. The big question we'd like to address is, can CCS help Guyana develop in a sustainable way? As we briefly explore this topic, we'd like to consider the unique geologic features of the Guyana Basin. Its recent strides in hydrocarbon discovery and production, the nation's commitment to reducing its carbon footprints, the CCS roadmap initiatives by the University of Guyana, all within the Sustainable Development Framework. The Guyana Sedimentary Basin is located along the northeastern South American Pacific coast, with proven reservoirs and trapping mechanisms suitable for CO2 storage, as long as other geologic factors are in place. The 2015 discovery of Lisa oil field in the offshore Starboard block marked a significant transformation for Guyana. So far, ExxonMobil and its partners have identified over 35 discoveries with an estimated 11 billion barrels of recoverable oil, with prospects for extension as additional projects are sanctioned in Stabroek, as well as other areas within the basin. The government of Guyana has implemented measures to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. A significant initiative in this direction is the Gas to Energy project, a collaboration with ExxonMobil designed to reduce reliance on fossil fuel. According to preliminary reports, another ongoing innovation offshore Guyana is the design of FPSOs that could capture CO2 onboard gas turbines, offering the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emission from FPSO operations by approximately 70%. In addition, the new Petroleum Activity Act of 2023 in Guyana has introduced licensing for pipeline operations and carbon storage, allowing companies to offset their petroleum operation emissions and successfully store CO2. At this point, I would like to pass the discussion to my colleague, who will provide more insights on CCS roadmap as regards the University of Guyana.
My name is Adiola Walcott from the Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Guyana. Guyana is historically known for its environmental stewardship efforts, particularly those related to forests and wetlands. The country has embarked on a transformative journey with the recent exploration and production of oil and gas. This is a unique opportunity early in the production process to shape development of the sector in a low-carbon and sustainable manner through CCS assessment as a mitigation option. CCS can bridge the gap between current emissions, projected emissions, and the required system for achieving low-carbon and sustainable development. There is proven success, potential, and advancement in developing countries such as Trinidad and Indonesia. Recognizing differences in national circumstances and the pivotal role of evidence-based decision-making, the University of Guyana plays a critical role in leading research. This includes assessing the economic viability, technical and technological requirements, potential barriers, mitigation for benefits, and sustainable economic growth benefits. To advance work in this field, the university hosted a webinar series last year focusing on the potential application and challenges associated with CCS in Guyana. Building on the momentum generated by the webinar series, there are opportunities to streamline CCS within the academic community through a CCS roadmap. The scope of the roadmap includes CCS awareness and capacity building sessions, conducting technical studies to assess the storage potential and the potential locations for CCS demonstration projects, expanding and formalizing relationships with the University of Trinidad and Tobago, IEAGHG, and the University of Texas at Austin to provide technical support and guidance, among others. By engaging in research and collaboration, the academic community can contribute to informed decision making and sustainable development for Guyana's future. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much to our colleagues in Guyana there. And now, very pleased to introduce Ms. Nomesia dos Reis from ANPM in Timor-Leste, here at the COP for the first time. And Nomesia is going to present from the podium. So, Nomesia, when you're ready, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Katherine, for the opportunity for us to present just a brief summary about the current progress of carbon capture and storage project in Timor-Leste. Well, in light of Paris Agreement and the importance of energy transition, the government of Timor-Leste is currently exploring the development of CO2 storage hub at the Bayundan Reservoir, a depleting gas and condensate field. The Bayundan field is located 250 kilometers south of Timor-Leste and approximately 500 kilometers northwest of Darwin in 80 to 100 meter water depth. The initial wells were drilled in 1994 and 1995, with first production in 2004. It has been producing gas and condensate since 2004, and it was successful, and it has been the cornerstone of Timor-Leste's economy since independence. Yet the Bayundan gas field is projected to come into an end to its gas production, and it's a possible prime candidate for conversion to an excellent CO2 storage project. The field not only has a very good physical characteristic for gas production, but also located in a geological storage structure, which estimated to have a potential to store safely and permanently about 250 million tons of CO2, and through injection up to 10 million tons of CO2 per annum. It is proposed that the first stream of CO2 to the facility would be from the Darwin Liquefied Natural Gas Facility in Australia, with CO2 transported via the existing natural gas pipeline. Moreover, the Bayundan CO2 storage project is also estimated to have the capacity to receive additional CO2 from industries in Northern Australia and in East Asia and Southeast Asia region. The possibility of repurposing the existing production facilities for CO2 storage will contribute to generate revenue for the government of Timor-Leste, support to help decarbonization in the region and global, and also create employment opportunities. To progress Bio-CCS project, the National Authority for Petroleum has signed several agreements or memorandums of understanding with potential commercial and technical partners. September 2021, a memorandum of understanding was signed between National Authority for Petroleum and Santos to progress a CCS at Bayundan in Timor Sea. The purpose of the MOU was to assess the feasibility of repurposing the Bayundan facility for CCS and utilization of Bio Reservoir as a suitable storage location for carbon storage. In January 2022, ANP established good cooperation with the Commercial Load Development Program in United States to assist ANP in providing the knowledge-sharing information in terms of CCS, legal regulatory framework, as well as geological storage and permitting. In October 2022, a cooperation agreement was signed between National Authority for Petroleum and IFC with the cross-support and funding from the World Bank that provides the support on CCS and regulatory framework building blocks, CCS local participation and fiscal benefits, as well as carbon market assessment. ANP is taking the role in coordination of Bayundan CCS development, yet under the current Decree Law number 46/2023 on the ninth Government Constitutional, in conjunction with the Decree Law number 59/2023, the Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources has the authority to coordinate, monitor, regulate, and license the CCS or CCUS project. Therefore, the CCS legal and regulatory framework that is currently undertaking between ANP and IFC will be coordinated and led by the Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources from January 2024 onwards. We appreciate the good cooperation with IFC. With their support, our team were able to actively participate in international CCS workshops, such as the International Energy Agency Greenhouse Gas Emission International Summer School in Bandung, the workshop on London Protocol provided by Norwegian experts, and other knowledge-sharing workshops. We also appreciate the cooperation with the Global CCS Institute. With their support, our team were able to attend the SICA workshop held in Jakarta and Thailand. We also appreciate the cooperation with CLDP. Our team recently participated in Southeast Asia and Southeast workshop in Jakarta in terms of harmonizing legal and regulatory frameworks within the region. However, despite all this, specific aspects and needs for capacity building and funding support that are more pertinent to our circumstances are advice on options for storage license terms and conditions, environmental oversight methodology for measurement, monitoring, and verification, as we understand that safety is crucial for public acceptance, typical templates for CO2 supply and transportation agreements, typical responsibilities of government for CO2 storage post-injection, post-license, including typical risk abandonment mechanisms such as insurance, capacity building on CO2 geological storage, capacity building on commercial model for CO2 storage, and so forth. I would like to emphasize that these are the progress update of CCS work that we have been doing so far. These works are all early initiatives, hence looking forward to have continued cooperation with IFC, with Global CCS Institute, and of course with the International Energy Agency for Greenhouse Gas Emissions and other relevant entities to see the possibilities of advancing the CCS initiatives in the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nomesia. That was a very good summary of the activities going on in Timor-Leste. And it was indeed a pleasure to have 5 of your colleagues at our summer school last year in Indonesia. So very good work. So we'll now wrap up, and that will be provided, and then we'll take questions. The wrap-up will be provided by Professor Katherine Romanak. Professor Romanak, over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's my pleasure just to kind of wrap up the session by saying I think what we're seeing here, I don't want to miss the fact that what we're seeing here is really, really incredible. We are seeing small island developing nations getting on the path to CCS. These nations are bearing the brunt of the climate change impacts, and they could very well be climate victims, but they're not. They are moving forward to mitigate their own emissions and to grow sustainably. And I think that is, that's really inspiring, and we thank you all for your work, and we really do thank you for collaborating with us. We see them all starting at different places. Trinidad is moving very quickly towards the technical assessments and the legal and regulatory frameworks and creating the enabling environment for them to move down the path to CCS. We see Guyana, which is currently a carbon negative country, but with a new resource that they can now use, standing at the precipice of development, clean development from day one, right? And so that's going to be also a really interesting exercise to see how they can do that. Can they develop with these new resources in a 100% sustainable way and keep their carbon negative, keep them carbon negative? And now we're so excited also to have Timor Leste walking down that path as well. They've found a very good candidate for a first pilot project, and they're moving towards that. So again, what we need now, any country with the will to get on the path to CCS and to look to see if it will work for them, any country can do this. I have seen some high-level remarks that emerging economies would never do CCS, and I think that's being proven wrong. You're an inspiration to us. We want to be there for you. We need finance to open up for CCS, all right? We need the Green Climate Fund to fund CCS projects, and we need a second round of the CCS Trust Fund from the World Bank to support these countries moving down the path to make this a reality for them. So thank you so much again. You're an inspiration to us. We love working with you, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Katherine, for that wrap-up. And now I'm really pleased that we have 5 minutes for questions to our panelists here. Any questions to our panelists?
So question and an ask, really. I mean, fantastic to see the knowledge sharing as you talked out, the baton passing through, and we're certainly keen to help on that. So I guess from a UK perspective, there's two asks, and really how do you do that? So the carbon management challenge, how can you see that holding countries like the UK, which have been the much bigger contributors to the carbonisation of the world, holding them to account to the abatement that we've put in? So how can we help you help us, hold us to account on the megatons of abatement that we put in? And then the second one, I think, sort of heard the need for funding. Now we've put certain commitments to funding. I was talking yesterday, sort of 1.6 billion into clean energy and climate mitigation projects announced this year. But I suppose offer the help to try and make sure that your funding requests make their way through to the funding pledges that we've had, and then holding us to account for those funding pledges and making sure that they're coming into there. So I suppose the question is the carbon management challenge the sort of route to hold us to account for our contribution, and also the route to get the funding that you need?
Okay, thank you, Alex. So given that it only just started yesterday and there's not much detail, but Karinsa, you sat in the room. What are your reflections on Alex's question about what can the Carbon Management Challenge do to help Trinidad and Tobago? Is that mic on?
Okay, thanks for the question. And I think, being in the room yesterday for me was a really exciting experience to hear, especially from some of the larger countries like the UK and the US and China, in terms of how they plan to contribute through the carbon management challenge and how it may work, especially for smaller countries like Trinidad and Tobago that are now, embarking on their CCS initiative, with, of course, constraints in terms of financial resources to push it through. So I think it's something that Trinidad and Tobago is very excited about. It's something that we are certainly interested in joining on to and seeing how it will actually be implemented in terms of the knowledge sharing, the collaboration, the financing. As you said, I think it's a pathway for us to make CCS, as big as it should be or as big as it needs to be in the short term, medium term, and distant future.
Maybe I can add to that. I think there's two scales of support as well. I think there's the scale of support that the World Bank and the ADB trust funds have provided, that really the money goes into the countries and it builds the capacity as the people in the country. And we heard your needs, Nomesia, for Timor-Leste, about developing the ability to do the storage capacity assessments in country. It's the same. We see you're developing it in Trinidad and Tobago. But that money is That's hundreds of thousands of pounds to do that capacity building. That's before we even think about projects and pilot projects, which are a very good thing to fund as well. But there's also a need, I think, for small-scale funding. As we've heard, our colleagues in Guyana just could not come to the COP. They wanted to. You had challenges getting your funding, and I think you had challenges as well. Just being able to travel to the international meetings, and not just ours, but everybody else's as well. There's a lot of knowledge sharing goes on in the CCS world. So I think a small pot to help with that as well would be very beneficial. Katherine, do you want to add anything?
Also, I think that, as your donor countries to the Green Climate Fund and your donor countries to these funds, you should be able to say what you want it used on. And so I think putting maybe a little bit of that information towards the Green Climate Fund would be helpful. So, yeah. We have one more.
We will take one. I'm being told time out. So the speakers will be around afterwards to take further questions. So we will not go away. We'll keep the panel just outside here. But that's a very good point to end on with the Green Climate Fund proposal. And I know the US government, Brad Crabtree, has recognized that as well. The need to prompt their donor money going in that must be not excluding its use for CCS projects. So I'd like to conclude this now by thanking, this is really important. Katherine summed it up fantastically. And it took a lot of effort, not just the work in the country, but coming to the COPs, getting the badges, getting the funding, and coming here and standing up in front of an audience that's also projected virtually online as well. So I'd like us to all show our appreciation to, in order, Deputy Permanent Secretary Tulsie, Professor Alexander, Professor Hosein, to Josephine, Maximus and Adiola, Walcott in Guyana, and Nomesia dos Reis from Timor Leste, and to Professor Romanak. Can we thank them? Show our sign of appreciation. Thank you very much.